In life, everybody is a business in and of themselves. What is the key to any success in any organization? It's organization. So if you want to be successful in your business, you have to learn how to organize yourself. Hello again, everyone. I'm Eli's dad with Project Eli, where we educate, we lead, and we inspire. And I want to go over some things, just some random thoughts that crept into my head that I jotted down that I wanted to share with you about organizing yourself to put yourself in that 5% group. Because one of the things you're going to find is that people in the 95% group let outside circumstances dictate their activities, their goals, their objectives, so on and so forth. And the people that are in the 5% group, those are the people that have organized themselves to achieve a certain objective. And let's go over some of the things. Let's go over a little bit about organization, organizing yourself. Let's start with a quote from Voltaire. Happiness lies in the cultivation of the garden. You can't just, you've got some nice soil and you want to grow some things. You can't just plant the seed, plant a seed here, plant a seed there, and then leave it alone. You've got to cultivate it. You've got to cultivate it, because if you just leave it alone, do you know what happens? Weeds start to grow. Take a lesson from that. Nature is, you'd be surprised, nature is very, very similar with plants, but also with people. You have to plant seeds, but you got to get rid of the weeds, or the growth that you desire and deserve is not going to be there because the weeds are going to take over the garden. So you have to be able to block out the weeds and fertilize the seeds that you want to grow. Your life is a garden, so make sure that you cultivate it. The next thing under organization is you've got to have the right vision. If you don't have the right vision, you're not going anyplace. I want to give you an example of that, okay? And this is an example from when I was coaching Frosh Soft Team. As a coach of a Frosh Soft Team, your objective is to get the players ready so that they can play varsity, teach them the skills. I love it because you're doing a lot of teaching. So you're teaching, you're developing, you're getting kids into good habits, so on and so forth. And also that you want to win games. That's a big thing. You got to teach people how to win, how to go for the jugular when it's there, how to be a winner. Well, the team that I had at that time were pretty good athletes, but they weren't basketball players. They played basketball because it was the season in between football and baseball, all right? But there were some pretty good athletes there. But they weren't particularly great basketball players. And so I had to get the right vision. The original vision you have is, you're going to get your team, they're going to be great offensive players, and they're going to score, and so on and so forth. But that was the wrong vision. It was the wrong vision because the parts that were there to achieve that goal, it wasn't good. It wasn't a good match. So I had to find a good match that was going to teach them skills and at the same time allow us to win some games, teach people how to win, how to be competitive. So I took a look at that in conjunction with my coaches. We discussed, and they said, you got some good athletes? 50% of the game is offense. What's the other 50%? Defense. So we decided that what I would do would be focusing on defense, how to press, how to get more possessions, because the more shots you take at the basket, you don't have to make as many if you're taking much more of them. And that's what our objective became. Now, what was great about the varsity coach, who was my superior in this, was we came to the conclusion, but he let me come up with the game plan. Always remember, as a leader, this is the outcome that I want. Can you do that? Yes. Okay, I'll leave it to you to do it. Now you can say, how are you going to do it, and explain, so on and so forth, which I did. And he said, okay, run with it. Because a person will work much harder to achieve a goal that they're setting for themselves than one that's thrust upon them. All right, or a method that's thrust upon them, I should say. Not a goal, but a method that's thrust upon them. So we worked and worked and worked, and the vision was stealing the ball. And that was what I sold them every single day in practice. And boy, when we get into timeouts, everybody puts their hands in. What do we yell? Defense! All right? I wanted their minds focused on that. And we were able to successfully, because we had very good athletes, we were able to steal the ball from other teams where they had better basketball players than we. So you have to have the right vision. That is one of the major keys to success. You can get to the point where consciously you're making solid choices when, solid choices in every situation that you're in. Okay, there I was in that situation. I was essentially a second year coach at that time, and I needed to, make a good decision. And with the help of my coaching mentor, Bruce Kint was his name, he put me in that direction. And you get to that point where you start thinking for yourself along those lines. Okay, you got to think out of the box, and that was thinking out of the box. Consistency equals confidence, and confidence equals momentum. And nothing could be truer than, as a basketball coach, if your players are consistently in the right spots, they're going to make steals, they're going to get confidence, and it spirals and spirals, and consistency builds momentum. And so we're there and we're making a run. We're scoring, 3 or 4 baskets in a row. The other coach is calling timeout. He's panicked. I even had one coach come up to me at halftime and say, "How do you guys do that? Help me. How do you guys do that?" Okay. Another thing you have to have is imagination. Now, what is it? Some people say, "Well, I'm not very imaginative." Okay. You have to, in order to be imaginative, you have to be disciplined. I know those two sound like polar opposites, but they're really not. What you have to do is you have to create some time where you're dedicating to thinking. Just thinking. I call it quiet thinking time. I've preached that from this pulpit like from the very beginning. It's a key thing. And to be candid with you, our current generation is somewhat at a disadvantage. And let me point out the way that, a couple of examples of what I'm talking about. Now we have TV, we have these movies, and they show, these great explosions, and they show, all this action, and so on and so forth, and it doesn't really leave that much to the imagination. Matter of fact, sometimes there's way too much gore in a movie for my taste, but that's just me, that's one person talking. But my point is, they don't leave very much to the imagination. Well, let's think back to radio. All right, when there was radio, now perhaps the most successful radio person was a guy named Jack Benny. Now you may or may not have heard of Jack Benny, but one of the things on his radio program was that Jack Benny was the cheapest person alive. I mean, absolutely so cheap, unbelievable. His most famous joke is a guy sticks a gun in his back and says, "Your money or your life?" And he doesn't say anything. And then the robber says, "Your money or your life?" And he says, "I'm thinking it over." All right? So, that was an indication of how cheap Jack Benny was. And the thing that I remember most was there was this one scene where he had to go down to his vault where he kept the money. And when he did that, you could hear him creeping down the steps, that there was a lock here, and then there was another lock. And there were, guards and so on. And it, you couldn't see it, but you could imagine it because of the way they presented it on the radio. Let me give you a different example. I was watching an old TV show the other day, and one of the scenes was a guy that was a secondary character in the thing was listening to a fight on the radio. All right, because they didn't televise every single fight like they do now for the most part. But anyway, this other guy comes back into the car and he says, "So how was the fight? How did the guy do?" And he goes, "It was a great fight." This is a guy listening on the radio to a description of somebody describing how two guys are punching each other out. It was a great fight. How do you know that? Because you use your imagination. You use your imagination. There was an announcer when I was younger. I'm a huge Celtics fan, an announcer named Johnny Most, who was the biggest homer of all times. But if you were from Boston, you absolutely loved listening to him. He was just absolutely phenomenal. And he would announce the games, and he would go, "And Bill Russell blocks the shot," and he would scream and yell, "It's all over, it's all over." All right? And you weren't there, but you could imagine it from the intonation of his voice. So using your imagination. Do we do that now? All right? If you want to step out of the box, you have to use your imagination. So during that quiet thinking time, that's when you discipline yourself to think different thoughts, to think out of the box, to see things not as they are, but as they could be. Does that make some sense? All right? Now, the last thing I want to talk about today is writing down your daily priorities. Why? Because the real power doesn't lie in executing the tasks that you're setting out for yourself. It lies in realizing what those tasks are. Clarity and focus are born out of writing down your priorities, not out of doing them. Why? Because when you put something in a coherent sentence, you have to think about what you're writing. And you have to visualize it, and you have to see it. So the act of writing something down that you're going to do just solidifies the task at hand. Once you figure out what it is you want to do, the actual execution becomes a lot easier because you have clarity. All right, so we've given you some things today about organizing. Next time we get together, we're going to go over more things about organizing yourself so that you can be a successful business. In my case, Eli's Dad Incorporated. Eli, in your case, you're Eli Incorporated. And let's always remember, don't ration the passion, fashion the passion. I'm Eli's dad.